Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today in this exciting session of the GLF conference titled Biodiversity for Resilience. My name is Rodrigo Barrios, and I'm Strategic Partnerships Manager at the Crop Trust, an international organization based in Bonn, Germany, working to safeguard our world's crop diversity forever. In this hour and a half, we will explore the current global state of our crop diversity, the lessons learned from past years and pending challenges when it comes to its conservation, and also the links that must be strengthened and promoted to ensure this resource is used in the field by farmers and producers. Our agrobiodiversity holds an enormous potential to tackle some of the most pressing challenges our agricultural and food systems are facing in the current context of growing population and changing climate. The experts joining us today will give a comprehensive outlook on this fundamental issue for food security and sustainable development and help pave a way forward now that our biodiversity targets are being reassessed. We encourage you all to check our first Slido question by using the QR code shown in the screen. We also encourage you to check the Whova app and the event website for more background on our speakers. Given we will have limited time and we will not be giving long introductions and jump directly to the issues. Now, to kick off this session, let me introduce you a quick video which will help start the session with an inspiring tone before moving ahead with our first panel, moderated by my colleague Charlotte Lusty, Head of Programs at the Crop Trust, which will gather leading gene bank managers globally to discuss what the global system for crop diversity conservation entails. On to the video, please, and thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Now, please let me introduce you to our first panel titled Building a Global Rational System for Crop Diversity Conservation. The panel will be moderated by my colleague Charlotte Lusty, Head of Programs at the Crop Trust, and will feature three leading gene bank managers from across the globe. The first is Testerio Nyamongo, who works in the Kenyan National Gene Bank. We have Laverne Gueco, who works in the University of Philippines, Los Baños, also in the Philippines National Gene Bank. And finally, Vania Acevedo, with extensive experience in Embrapa and in Brazilian National Gene Bank, and now leading the gene bank in Ikrisat in Hyderabad. Welcome all.
Thanks, Rodrigo. It's great to be part of this panel and to be with my colleagues here. As you saw in the video, there is a community of us working on agricultural biodiversity, and there's many aspects to the community that we work in. There are very tight community that is all bound under one international treaty, the International Treaty for Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. We also have many other aspects that bind us together, including a commission based at the FAO. We have gene bank standards that are published. We have a global plan of action that binds our community together using similar, the same targets and activities. And all of this, I think, adds a lot of strength to what we do and helps us reach some important objectives. And with us in the panel today, we have 3 gene bank managers who are from very different parts of the world. They work on different crops, and they have very different scopes to their gene banks. And I think it's a good opportunity for us to understand a little bit more about the community and the things that bind us. And so I would like to pose a few questions to the panel members. And I'm going to pose my first one to our Kenyan friend, Desterio Nyamongo. Greetings there. Habari gani, Desterio? So, Desterio, tell us, I mentioned a few things about our community and the things that we all share in common. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about this system and what would life be like if we didn't have these things that keep us working together?
Thank you, Charlotte. If there's anything that's good that has happened in the recent years, is having the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources in place. I know it was triggered by the negotiations then that were going on under the CBD, where Nagoya was being negotiated. And men and women then decided that food security is so important thing that we can't allow it to start political debate of how best we can share our resources. And that's how the international treaty was born. Now the international treaty has enabled us to expand, enables access of genetic resources, accessing the diversity. Remember, it has some mechanisms under it, like material transfer agreements, where countries easily exchange materials, and the materials are then available to breeders for use to address agricultural challenges that indeed productivity. So having a regime like the international treaty is it addresses the issues of food and hunger. Now, secondly, the video that we have just seen, see if the problem being mentioned there, you are not able to get to the areas where you can get resistant genes to then develop the varieties that are required. That will indeed develop agricultural development completely. Now, having the GPA, it has assisted identify the global gaps in terms of biodiversity conservation and set the conservation and the use agenda so that parties are informed on what is constraining their conservation and how it should be utilized. Secondly, it's an instrument that you can use to mobilize resources for utilization in the conservation work. That genetic resources go across boundaries. In other words, you cannot just leave them. They don't respect the national borders. And that's why having such a global community with such instruments makes it very useful to secure our global biodiversity.
No, that's very helpful, Desterio. You're coming from a national collection with a national focus, but you're saying this international treaty allows countries around the world to share important resources that will help us develop agriculture and address food security. And that's a very important aspect of the treaty and also the activities of the global plan of action that brings us all together. And maybe Vania Azevedo from India, based in Hyderabad, working on an international collection. Vania, maybe you can also make some complementary comments on what Desterio is saying. What do you think life would be like without this treaty and without the facilitation of sharing materials across borders?
Charlotte, if we didn't have the treaty, then the mechanism, the only mechanism now currently available is the Nagoya Protocol. And imagine going through the readers of negotiations under the Nagoya Protocol so as you access the genetic resources, especially in the event of a pandemic or an urgent challenge that you require genetic resources to address that particular challenge.
Right. So
having bilateral,
yeah, a lot more work. Yeah. Vanya, what have you got to add to this?
Yeah, so clearly after the CBD, the countries started to become a bit more protective and sharing their materials, right? Especially the native ones. And as the CEO said, the crops do not respect borders, and we all are completely dependent on exotic material. So all the countries depend on other countries to maintain their agriculture. So I always remember Vaus, my colleague from Embrapa, in all his presentations about genetic resources, he always asks, what did you have for lunch today? So in Brazil, the typical lunch would be rice, beans, tomatoes, lettuce, meat, maybe cassava, the only native one. So Brazil is completely dependent on exotic material. But of course, Brazil also has lots of genetic resources that is native from there. Lots of tropical fruits, cassava, and some things that they became more and more protective, like all the countries. And the treaty came to support the exchange of material to be there. And also to help us and as international gene banks to be able to keep distributing and answering to the demands from the entire world for the specific crops that we are keeping. So agreements like this allow us to keep doing our work and allow the countries to keep receiving the material that they depend on to develop their agriculture, because the demands are always changing, the climate is changing, the diseases are appearing from all the sides. So we need diversity to keep developing agriculture. So the treaty is very important to allow this to continue.
Thanks, Vanya. So we've painted a picture of this unique situation where different parties are able to share resources across borders. We are comfortable in the knowledge that it isn't going to take a long time to do this, a lot of paperwork. We don't have to worry about urgency. We should be able to move varieties of banana and maize and the crops that are important to sorghum and the millets. So we've got that policy framework. We've got the trust that helps us move stuff across borders. Maybe I could move on to Laverne, who's based in the Philippines. And Laverne, we have different types of gene banks in our system. And you are working in a national program there in Los Baños. Can you describe a little bit what is the scope of your gene bank there, and how do you see the system with the layering of different gene banks, from the international ones, the national ones? Perhaps there are community ones. Can you describe a little bit how it works from your perspective?
Yeah, I think let me try to differentiate also national from international gene banks. So I think mostly international gene banks focuses more on specific crops across different countries, while national gene banks work on a wide range of crops, obviously with more focus on the countries of origin. But I think collaborations between these two gene banks is very important. So ideally, national gene banks should duplicate collections in international gene banks, so that in an event that something goes wrong with a collection, they always have backups, and they can always repatriate lost germplasm collections. So I think it's important to have a strong collaboration between the two. So yes.
So you really rely on another place, an international collection. If you were to lose something from your collection, you'd be able to get it back because it's duplicated. Are there other things that you would like to see happening? Do you think international gene banks could do more of something, or national gene banks could do more of something else? What do you see as the division of roles here?
I think international gene bank settings is well in place, obviously because most international gene banks have the resources and the facilities to do the conservation and evaluation work. So for national gene bank, it varies from one country to another. So there are countries which have very huge or big programs on genetic resources conservation, while there are some countries with minimal conservations. I think for major crops also in general, they are well studied also. But I think what probably national gene banks could also focus on is more on indigenous and native species of plants, because normally these underutilized species are underutilized, and they need to be collected, conserved, and evaluated, because some of these native species have some great potentials. And probably if we could somehow evaluate and see some good materials, we can somehow promote their use and somehow helping also in conserving these materials.
That does sound very important. Laverne, tell me something about what you might find in the Philippines. I always see in the market stalls there piles and piles of the most fantastic looking greens and different types of beans. What would you say in your mind is something we should all be eating, but you can only find it in the Philippines?
Well, we do have a lot of interesting fruits, exotic fruits that are shared, not just found in the Philippines, but maybe shared within some of our Asian countries, like, for example, mangosteen, durian, and among others. But if you are looking for some species which are endemic to the Philippines, I think the pili nut is very excellent. It has excellent eating quality. It has other uses, like the oil is excellent, and it's somehow also tolerant to strong typhoons, which is frequent in the Philippines. So and very adapted and probably resistant to most pests and diseases available. So it's something interesting.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that with us. Vanya, maybe I could get your perspective quickly from the international side. Do you see Laverne's point about international collections being an important safety duplicate for the national collections and focusing on a different type of crop? Just quickly give us your opinion. We've got quite a few questions, so I'll move on to them afterwards.
Yeah, I think he's totally right. It's clear that we work as a copy of the collections. Lots of the materials were collected like 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And repatriation is something that happens quite a lot. Yes. So many countries, when they are able to reestablish or to improve their infrastructures, they come back to us and they ask us to repatriate the material that was collected there. So ICRISAT already repatriated a few thousands of accessions to at least 15 countries. So they rely on us, that they believe that we will keep this material alive, well conserved, safely duplicated. So yeah, I agree that this is also one of the jobs that we have in international gene banks. And the diversification of crops is something that now that we have more focusing more in nutrition and other kinds of necessities of human food. I think it's something important that we should be discussing. And adding not all, it's totally impossible to replicate what all the national gene banks are doing. But I believe that the international gene banks can increase a little bit more the scope based on the other crops that have high demands as well. Yes.
Right. So, I mean, let's touch a bit more upon access to these resources. And Laverne, actually, there's a question for you. Is there a way for Filipino locals to contribute and withdraw from the gene bank? So how do people get in touch with you, or either to put something in or to ask you for resources?
So so normally we do have some collecting missions. So normally we have partners in a particular area, and we usually ask them to give us some of the interesting genetic resources. Although normally we have target species being collected, but yeah, normally we do collecting missions. There are also some other people or researchers who are giving or donating to our gene bank, so we can for storage. So we also accept donations from private and from other government institutions, and people access or researchers access our genetic resources by just filling up a form, distribution form. And most of our clients are plant breeders, because most of our genetic resources are being used by our breeders in our institute for crop improvement work. And we do know the importance of having a broad-based genetic materials in crop improvement.
And is it something they can look at online? How might someone get hold of the form in order to send in a request? Do people have easy?
At the moment, we still have. They have to go personally to us or send us email, but we actually have a database already. We're just hopefully we can upload the database within the next few months, so that this database may be available to the general public, so that they can access our database. So we call it Pilgris. So it includes our genetic resources.
Right, and you obviously have a good relationship with breeders. They know how to get to ask for what they need.
Yes, that's
and I don't know if we still have Disterio on the line. He's got a mute button. So if Disterio is still there, it'll be great to ask him. Here he is. But you'll have to unmute Disterio. How do farmers in Kenya or breeders, researchers, how do they get hold of materials from your gene bank? And do you think it's important to increase the availability of resources that you have available? Sorry, just to add another little question, how do you address issues like benefit sharing?
Thanks for that question. Now, one of the ways that scientists and the farmers access our materials is that we normally have field demos where we involved the other stakeholders, who include the farmers and the researchers. So when we have those demonstration or field days, they get to know our materials, and we get farmers making requests. We have recently joined the global community in having our database in Genesis, and I hope that is going to improve access of the materials, because then the global community will get to know what's available at our national gene bank. Otherwise, just like my previous speaker said, people write us emails, make formal requests, and then we respond to those requests. But because we have yet to upload all what we have into the website, not many people get to know what is available. We have had cases where even our own scientists going out to make collections of materials we actually already have at the gene bank. So that's a gap that needs to be filled. Now, issues of benefit sharing. Materials that are listed under Annex 1 are exempted from the rigors of the Nagoya Protocol, and they are available following the standard material transfer agreement requirements. But materials that are not in Annex 1, sharing within the country, there is no much of a problem. but getting those materials outside the country, then there's a little bit of problem. That's why I think the negotiations we were having during the last GB meeting in Rome, we needed to enhance the material, the MLS system, so that we are able to expand the Annex 1 to cover much more materials, so that those materials are then available globally. Having not succeeded doing that during the last GB, I think is regrettable.
Yeah, so benefit sharing is a very big issue that we are trying to get right. And benefit sharing comes in many forms, whether it's in the form of the actual material that is shared or the data associated with it. But also the treaty allows us to have a mechanism whereby if anyone's making business or profit out of adaptations of this material, they are obliged to share some of their profit. So the treaty allows us to have that mechanism in place, but obviously still a lot more work to get that working. Now, just going on to some of the questions that are coming up. One of the questions is about the materials that have been grown in the past. So historical materials. Vanya, how old is your collection? Do you have in ICRISAT things that are very old that perhaps aren't found anymore in farmers' fields?
Older than me. Some of the materials here were collected in 73, so 1973. So we have very, very old materials. All of them characterized. Some of them we are not using all the time, or people are not asking. So it's an interesting question, because most probably with the climate change and adaptation, this material may perform a bit different now. So it's something interesting. But we have 128,000 accessions, so it's not very easy to conduct all this recharacterization again. But yes, we have very, very old material here.
Yeah, that's a lot of material. So that means a lot of diversity and a lot of different things having grown from the past. Laverne, do you have some old varieties in your gene bank, things that you can't find anymore in fields?
Yes, actually our national gene bank was established in 1976. So it's a bit younger than what ICRISAT have. So we do have some old collections, and unfortunately in the Philippines also, like there are already some of these traditional varieties are being displaced already, like the occurrence of genetically modified crops and improved varieties. Somehow some of the farmers have maybe a lot of the materials that we have in the gene banks are no longer available in the field. However, because our gene bank is quite old and it's a national gene bank and we don't get a lot of fundings, there are some cases that we are already experiencing some problems in the germination of some of them. So there is a need to regenerate some of our collections and somehow to ensure that they're viable for a longer period of time.
Right, so that's an important point that ex situ brings, the possibility to conserve things that people are no longer able or interested to grow. And I guess that gives some connection to in situ conservation. Laverne, I don't know if you have connections with people who are conserving in communities or in situ. Is there a connection between ex situ and in situ in the Philippines?
Well, mostly we work on ex situ, but we encourage in situ conservation, especially for farmers' varieties, also especially for endemic fruit species where they are perennial. So actually, whenever we do collecting missions, we always encourage people to conserve these materials. And sometimes when you take pictures of the plants and you tell them these are very important, so somehow the farmers find value on keeping these materials instead of just sometimes farmers are tempted to cut those trees because sometimes they don't find much value on them, or sometimes they use it for other purposes. But when they see us giving value to those species, and the possibility that some other important things may come out from those materials, somehow we also encourage in situ conservation.
Thanks, Laverne. That's good to hear. Desterio, another point for you. How can we mobilize more resources for national gene banks? How do you have any experience of this, or how to fundraise, how to attract more funding coming in to support what you do? Difficult question.
Yeah, what we have been doing is to get our exchequer, the National Treasury, support the conservation initiatives. And we managed to do that by getting the issue of genetic resources and farmers' rights in the Kenya Constitution. We recently had an amendment to the Seed and Plant Varieties Act again, which covered issues of conservation, genetic resources conservation, and farmers' rights. That way, we are getting closer to the policies and the people who govern how national resources are distributed. I think the parties have the responsibility to ensure that they undertake the conservation work, and with the challenges of climate change, that's becoming more and more clear to the policymakers. The other way of resource mobilizing is to work with the global community. We have worked with the Crop Trust, for example, as you are aware, and they have assisted us mobilize resources to support some of the work that is going on at the National Gene Bank. We also respond. Sorry.
No, I think we're running out of time, Desterio, but you make some really important points about how we have to appeal to governments to see how important this work is and how it supports really vital needs to address climate change. I mean, after all, we all have to eat, and it has to come from all of the hardworking farmers who need every support and access to diversity that they need to ensure that they build stronger systems. Maybe as we pull out of our session, I just add that it's been a real pleasure talking to you all, and I know it's very late for you, Laverne, in the Philippines, so many thanks for you for joining. And Desterio, it's great to see you. I'm sorry we don't get the chance to meet in person. And Vania, I know you've been in a lot of different meetings, and here you are joining us now. So I just want to give a very grateful appreciation for joining you. And I think at this point we can move back to Rodrigo. Thanks.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Mabuhay! My name is Nelisa Hamora. I am an agriculture economist and the coordinator of the Gene Bank Impacts Fellowship Program with support from the CGIAR Gene Bank Platform and the Crop Trust. I co-run this program with Melinda Smale, Professor of International Development at Michigan State University. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to present here today and thank the Global Landscape Forum for providing this platform. With the onset of COVID-19, solutions to combat climate change, biodiversity loss, and food insecurity are ever more urgent. And although it may seem unlikely to some, the world's gene banks and their impacts have a big part to play in contributing to such solutions. First of all, I'd like to talk about the program and why we think it is important. Our Gene Bank Impact Fellows help document the contributions of gene banks and the germplasm they conserve and distribute. They get to work on research projects, join workshops, are mentored by economists and conservation scientists. But what are impacts? Impacts are positive and negative, primary and secondary, directly or indirectly, intended or unintended, long-term effects produced by a development intervention. And what is impact assessment? They are studies that estimate the causal effects of research outputs and related activities on one or more development parameters of interest. The goal of the Gene Bank Impacts program is to show the causal effects from the gene bank, our intervention of interest, to development outcomes. Such outcomes could be improvements in yield, productivity, household income, or food security. To be able to establish this link, you could trace the pathway from the gene bank to the breeders and scientists in research programs to the development of new and improved varieties and release international seeds systems, and eventually to the adoption of farmers. We show how farm productivity is improved, how farmers benefit from high yields, and consumers benefit from lower food prices and enhanced food security. Everyone's happy, right? Unfortunately, as in everything, it's not as easy as it seems. The flow of germplasm from the gene banks to breeders to farmers could take many years, and the effects to household welfare need additional time to materialize. It is a long-term process, and along the way, we need to isolate the factors that could affect this relationship both spatially and temporally. We can establish this causality by showing one or two anecdotes or success stories from a few individuals. This is where the Gene Bank Impacts program enters the picture. There has to be a body of literature that documents such links and establishes the causality and gene bank attribution using data from farm surveys complemented by data from the breeders and the gene bank's information systems evaluated using econometric techniques and other scientific methods. Sounds complicated, right? It is, but it is necessary. So now, when we talk about gene bank impacts, we can refer with confidence, for example, the contribution of Erie's International Rice Gene Bank to varietal improvement and crop productivity in Eastern India, where we use a survey data set collected from about 9,000 farmers. Another study looked at the contribution of the SIA Gene Bank to the development of iron biofortified bean varieties and well-being of farm households in Rwanda using dataset of about 1,400 farmers. The studies by our Gene Bank Impact Fellows map out the variables and actors that could affect these causal relationships, so we could properly attribute the contribution of the gene bank. These results and the work of the fellows is an important stepping stone in understanding how we can meaningfully contribute to the change the world needs. I'd like to close by acknowledging the work from our Gene Bank Impacts community of practice. Thank you for being part of the solution, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for this great presentation. Before moving ahead with the program, I would first like to reflect on the first question that we pitched before the start of the panel. We asked the audience what one or two words come to mind when hearing the concept gene banks and their importance for sustainable development. And it's very interesting to see a very wide range of questions, from advancement and competitiveness to food security, diversity, and just security at large. It's true that gene banks hold some of our most important resources when it comes to ensuring food security and sustainable development forever. So their benefits are also far-ranging and include many of these important words. So I would like to move ahead with a second video that highlights the role that farmers and users play in this important topic. Thank you.
Dry, hot weather is shriveling crops in the heart of America's farm belt.
Have fueled massive forest fires in the Siberian Arctic.
Biodiversity is reportedly declining faster than that of any time in human history.
So I hope this video gives an inspiring note to our following segment of the session. Almost 5 years back, when we committed to the SDG agenda, we pledged to secure all of our agrobiodiversity by 2020. This is 2 months from now. Although it is clear this target is not yet achieved, it is also encouraging to hear that scientists and policymakers from around the globe are working jointly to build a global system that ensures the very foundation of our food systems is safeguarded forever. However, conservation is only one side of the coin. Safeguarding all of these crops must go hand in hand with ensuring that they are used in the field and that the benefits resulting from this use support farmers' livelihoods and increase the well-being of consumers. Agrobiodiversity can play a fundamental role in ensuring greater resilience in the agricultural systems and a more universal access to good and nutritious food for all. With this in mind, we will now transition into our second segment of the session, which will focus on agrobiodiversity for use. We have posted a second question in Slido, which we encourage you to answer in preparation for the next talk and panel. Now, please welcome Martin van Zonneveld, Gene Bank Manager at the World Vegetable Center in Taiwan, who will set the stage for this second segment of our session, followed by an exciting panel with leading scientists that will delve into different aspects of crop diversity use and its short and long-term potential to tackle some of our food system's most pressing challenges. Now on to Martin. Thank you.
My name is Maarten van Zonneveld, Gene Bank Manager at World Veg. We maintain a global key collection of 65,000 accessions of vegetables of more than 450 species from more than 150 countries. And we distribute that germplasm, the seed of those gene bank accessions, with a standard material transfer agreement in line with the International Treaty for Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. Conservation and utilization of crop biodiversity are basically two sides of the coin, of the same coin. Better conservation and availability of crop biodiversity leads to a better utilization of this biodiversity. And vice versa, a better utilization of crop diversity gives incentives to better conserve this biodiversity. Partnerships are essential to conserve and utilize vegetable biodiversity. At the World Veg Gene Bank, we aim to establish partnerships with communities of users, with different types of communities of users, like breeders, farmers, researchers, and it's key in these partnerships that we provide information to our users so that they can select the gene bank accessions and the germplasm that they want, and at the same time establish a clear connection also with the conservation in the gene bank, that both the users benefit, but also we make sure that the vegetable biodiversity remains conserved in our gene bank for future users. Here we are at the multiplication site of eggplant wild relatives that have been sent by Kew's Royal Botanical Garden as part of the Global Crop Relative Project, and with seed that have been collected in different African countries by national park partners, also from Asian countries. We multiply the seeds, we characterize the accessions, and then we put that information online in our information system, and we also upload that data to Genesis, so that users all around the world can request the seed of these eggplant wild relatives and also learn about the information. Now, this eggplant wild relative is especially interesting for pre-breeding, because these are eggplant wild relatives, and recently in a pre-breeding project of the Crop Trust there have been made a lot of effort to link the conservation of this germplasm with the screening and the pre-breeding of these wild eggplant relatives by crossing them with cultivated eggplants like the African eggplant, the brinjal eggplant, and related to seed companies who are very interested in developing improved varieties that they can then provide to smallholders for an affordable price, so that we really can scale new resilient varieties of nutritious vegetables to smallholders. So partnerships are essential to conserve and utilize vegetable biodiversity. Also, that is true for regeneration or seed increase of our gene bank accessions. Once in a while we need to refresh the seed, or when we acquire new gene bank accessions like these eggplant wild relatives, we increase the seed. And we cannot do that alone. So therefore in Taiwan we established a network with local seed companies, global seed companies, farmers, in a network of what we call citizen regenerators. So these citizen regenerators, they request germplasm of the crops that they are interested in, and that's the beauty of vegetables. There's so many vegetables that people are interested in. So one seed company selects pumpkin, another one bitter gourd, another one bottle gourd, another one broccoli, and so on a network we have different citizen regenerators multiplying the seeds of the crops that they are interested in. They return the seed to the gene bank, they keep part of the seed with them because that is their incentive, so that they can use it in their own crop development programs. In that way we increase the availability of the germplasm for those specific seed companies, but also to the global agriculture research community. Each year we come together to evaluate and share the information with each other, including the morphological characterization data, so that also the other partners or the other members of the citizen regenerator network can benefit from the activities from the other members. The World Veg Gene Bank and the World Veg breeders are basically working as one team together to make sure that we get basically a lot of vegetable diversity out there for breeders to use, from public institutions, private institutions, and so that we can reach farmers in the end. So that is also why we collaborate in the eggplant and carrot pre-breeding activities of a project supported by the Crop Trust. So in the carrot pre-breeding project, WorldVeg is working together with USDA scientists and local partners in Bangladesh and India to evaluate new lines of carrots within different agricultural zones from Bangladesh and India to see which lines perform best in the different zones, so that farmers can use the selected lines for vigorous and resilient and nutritious carrot production. Now, in the gene bank of WorldVeg we maintain more than 450 species, of which many we call them traditional vegetables. Those are the vegetables that you find in local dishes when you go out in a restaurant somewhere and you suddenly get a surprise of a new taste. That's probably a traditional vegetable. Unfortunately, for many of these traditional vegetables, no breeding programs exist, and in many dishes where traditional vegetables are being used, they might get lost. People might forget about the dishes because they are accustomed to a new type of diet, more mainstream, which is similar to diets that you find anywhere else in the world. So we are losing a lot of knowledge about how to prepare these traditional vegetables, how to grow these traditional vegetables, and at the same time these vegetables, they are under research. That means that they're not really breeding programs, they're not really agronomy programs about that. So we need to find ways to enhance the utilization and conservation of these traditional vegetables. So to enhance the conservation and utilization of traditional vegetable biodiversity, such as this beautiful roselle accession, and here we have another roselle accession. In other parts of the world they know it as Jamaica. So to enhance the conservation and utilization of traditional vegetable biodiversity, such as this beautiful roselle accession, and here we have another roselle accession. In other parts of the world they know it as Jamaica. And we use the calyxes to make tea out of it, or delicious juices. So to enhance the utilization of this type of underutilized and very healthy and vegetables, we are developing seed kit activities. That means that we develop seed kits with different types of vegetables, traditional vegetables, so that people can establish a home garden, or at schools school children and the teachers can establish school gardens, so that they get acquainted with these traditional vegetables and grow them for home consumption, or to consider them in educational programs. To enhance the utilization of this type of underutilized and very healthy and vegetables, we are developing seed kit activities. That means that we develop seed kits with different types of vegetables, traditional vegetables, so that people can establish a home garden, or at schools school children and the teachers can establish school gardens, so that they get acquainted with these traditional vegetables and grow them for home consumption, or to consider them in educational programs. How and when do we want to involve breeders in pre-breeding, and how desirable is that? This question might be of interest for the next panel that focuses on pre-breeding. Over to you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure hearing your presentation, Marty van Zannevel, and thank you for the question. Thanks, Rodrigo, for introduction, and the Crop Trust NORAD for supporting this side event. As I'm waiting for my panelists to join the live feed with their camera, I want to give a big virtual hug to our audience, all of you. You are for your dedication to Food Forever, which sounds like a great thing. My name is Filippo Bassi. I will be the moderator for the next 30 minutes of a great panel of experts. I'm looking forward to engage them. I am a senior scientist based in Icarda, Morocco. I was awarded in 2017 the Holland Prize for Innovation in Food Security for some of the work we do in Africa and West Asia. I also lead a project with the Crop Trust and NORAD for pre-breeding. So after learning the many critical aspects of collecting, conserving, and distributing biodiversity from the gene bank, I'm excited to use it. How do we get this into farmers' hands, right? And this is really all about the challenges and scientific complexity of transforming weeds. Some of the plants we see with Martin are a little bit strange or are very old and abandoned. How we transform these into profits and income for farmers. So it's really how to go from point A, the gene bank, to point B, the farmers. I have some very great experts with me today. They can try to answer this. But as we go on and we do a first round of the table, I want to invite the audience to start writing down their questions so that we might ask them. My first question to the panelists is, what are you doing to go from point A to point B? I mean, how do you go from the gene bank to the farm? I would like, oh, Alejandro disappeared on me. I want to ask, here he is with this beautiful picture behind it. Dr. Alejandro Argumedo is the program director of Association Andes, based in Peru. He coordinates several indigenous people organizations with the goal of protecting and nurturing biodiversity and promoting indigenous food. I would like to hear from you some of your story. What are you doing for bringing diversity into farmers' field?
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I work in a very exciting conservation and utilization initiative managed by 6 Quechua communities in the high Andes of Peru. This is around 9,000 hectares, around 5,000 people who manage this area dedicated to the potato. The initiative is in the Sacred Valley of the Incas. It harbors the highest potato in situ potato diversity in the world, around 1,300 varieties, and the farmers manage this crop that they have cultivated for millennia. As you know, potatoes are originated in the Andes. So this genetic diversity and the wild crop relatives that also are located in the park are extraordinary. And I'm very happy to say that in this endeavor, we are collaborating closely with the International Potato Center. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this was inspiring, some beautiful work with indigenous communities. I would like to hear now from Dr. Shivali Sharma. She's a senior scientist of ICRISAT based in India. She leads different research activity to adapt several tropical crops to climate change, including some very nice work on wild relatives funded by the Crop Trust. Tell us a little bit more about what are the activities you're currently doing.
Thanks, Filippo. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you are. I'm Shivali Sharma. I'm working as theme leader in ICRISAT, and I'm based at the headquarters in Hyderabad, India. So what we do in pre-breeding is we provide a platform to enhance the utilization of germplasm conserved in gene bank for crop improvement. And we act as a link between the gene bank and breeding programs. So our main objective is to create new and diverse variability by using wild species as donors and cultivated varieties as recipient. So we are focusing on the traits which are not available in the cultivated gene pool, or the traits which we have lost during the course of domestication, evaluation, and selection of modern varieties. So we just, we are trying to bring in those adapted gene complexes and the alleles from wild species back into the breeding pipeline. So that's how, we are just trying to diversify the genetic base of the modern varieties. And thanks to the Global Crop Diversity Trust for funding 2 projects, one in pigeon pea. Pigeon pea is Cajanus cajan, which is an important legume crop, and another on pearl millet, which is Panacetum glaucum, which is an important dryland cereal crop. So in pigeon pea, by using wild Cajanus species, we have already developed introgression lines with improved tolerance to salinity and resistance to important diseases. And we have shared these lines with the breeder in Myanmar, in Kenya, as well as in national breeding programs in India. And these lines last year, 6 of these pre-breeding lines, they were also nominated by our NARS partners in the varietal release pipeline. So this shows a real great impact. And recently, one private seed company, Daftari Seeds, they also showed keen interest in using these pre-breeding line in their breeding program. So this is something which we are doing in pigeon pea, and we are also trying to improve pod borer tolerance by using wild species. And the hypothesis is to combine different components conferring pod borer tolerance from different species into a common variety, and work is going on. In pearl millet also, we have developed introgression lines with improved resistance to blast, which is an emerging disease. And it's a devastating disease, which is really adversely affecting pearl millet production and productivity. So this is something which we are doing under the project funded by the Global Crop Diversity Trust. We are also working in chickpea, and we have developed very good material using wild Sicer species. In peanuts also, we are working to diversify the genetic base of lead leaf spot resistance and other diseases using wild Arachis species. So this is something which we are doing, and our aim is to ensure continuous supply of new and diverse genetic variability into the breeding pipeline, so that the breeders can use this new diversity to develop new varieties which are more climate resilient with a broad genetic base. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, and this is, you already see the diversity of this panel, which I love. 2 very different approaches to something equally important. We have used the term pre-breeding. I hope everybody is okay with that. It means basically everything you do a little bit before breeding, before it becomes a variety, you do a little bit of work to make it sure it's possible. So the point A to B can be a zigzag, can be a straight line, everybody does its way, but all of it is scientific and complex. And my next person, I like him a lot, is a very committed person in bettering African agriculture. Dr. Maria Andrade, she's a principal scientist of the International Potato Center. She's a sweet potato breeder, country manager of SIP based in Mozambique, and serving the board of directors of Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa. She was also awarded in 2016 the World Food Prize for her work on biofortification of crops, and she continues today her work to deliver better sweet potato varieties to African farmers. So tell us a little bit more about the many great things you do from going from A to B.
Thank you, Filippo, for this very exciting introduction of myself. Indeed, as a matter of fact, if you see, I'm very sensitive to this topic, agrobiodiversity, food, nutrition, because I grew up in a place where food was never enough, nutrition was always a problem, and it's drought. If you know where I'm from Cape Verde Island. So the idea of conservation of agrobiodiversity, it was very important even when I was maybe, let's say, 9 years old, because there was very little around. So in Mozambique, like you said, I'm a sweet potato breeder indeed, and we serve the whole continent of Africa. And we kind of divide Africa in 3 portions according to the uses of sweet potato, because Southern Africa, including Mozambique, is a country of catastrophe, flood, drought. You heard about Cyclone Idai, where all the sweet potato on the lowland during the cyclone disappear. And at this moment, for example, we are trying to reintroduce the material into those sites to be able to provide food and nutrition for the people affected in central Mozambique. During the course of my work together with the National at the Research Institute, we have developed close to 30 varieties of sweet potato which are resilient and drought tolerant. But the other parts of Africa also, they deal with other problem, biotic problem like weevil resistant, weevil problem, viral diseases, and the West Africa will look into quality. So we try to stratify it very well in such a way that my colleagues is solving the problem in one part of Africa, and myself, I deal with drought, which with the climate change at the moment is quite critical. So how we move on this breeding program from the gene bank into the users, which are the farmers, which are our ultimate consumers. As you know, for example, as a breeding becomes so important that it's too important that they will not allow it in my hand because I will breed for myself. So therefore, we're going to use lots of other intervenient in a process of developing what we call the product profile. These are the stage gate process where we involve social scientists, we involve breeders, we involve farmers, and all together, private sector in deciding what are the best sweet potato or the best potato for the consumers. So, whereas at the International Potato Center, which the organization I work for has one of the largest in vitro gene bank with a global collection of potato, sweet potato, and Andean roots and tuber crops. As you know, all this collection comprise over 10,000 accessions, and all of these, like we hear another colleague talking about trust and the International Treaty for Plant Genetic Resource for Food and Agriculture. And also, if you see, these are all subject to what we call a standard material transfer agreement. And if you see, a lot of our program have received this material to put in our crossing block to develop what the farmer is looking for. And this standard, and also International Potato Center, has this standard organization accreditation, which regulates the process for safe and secure gene-plus movement. So it's very well controlled, how we receive, how we send, how it's cleaned, and how they come back. For example, at this moment, we have a fund from Crop Trust, which we are collecting some land race in Africa, which will be taken there for cleanup, and then later on for repatriation. So all these, if you see, it is in a way these clones are in the gene bank with all the traits that the farmers need, that the breeders need to integrate in their breeding program towards a better value. The same way also we have.
Let me ask you a difficult question. You're telling me what you're doing, and I like it very much, but I'm very curious to know why. So much commitment to get there, you know? Why do you believe so firmly in the use of biodiversity? What is the future? Is it climate change, the answer? Is it something else? I would like to hear some key words from you.
Yeah, you see, like the biodiversity is as important as the climate change. Sometimes we undermine the roles of biodiversity for poverty reduction, for food, for nutrition, and for water security. I don't see climate change more important than biodiversity. I see we need to really work very hard to conserve our biodiversity, to make sure that our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren will be able to enjoy the food that we are enjoying right now. And money should be put in this aspect to be able to conserve. And that is what I think, because I grew up very poor. I grew up without food, without nutrition. And I think I need to work in a way to produce good, productive variety of sweet potato. Of course, I cannot do all crops, but I put my hand in sweet potato, looking into good productivity, good nutrition, in order to make those children and the nation and the country to grow stronger and to really have a country which is economically much better than without food and all that.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody could say with more commitment and more convincement than you. I mean, honestly, I am 100% with you. But you know, I'm gonna put the other panelists in trouble now. Why, Shivali Sharma? Why are you doing what you're doing in terms of pre-breeding activities? What is the higher commitment?
Oh, it's a really interesting question. So as we are talking about climate change, so new diseases and the new biotic stresses, they are emerging as major threat to crop production and productivity. As I said, in case of pearl millet, blast was never a problem, but now it is coming up as a major constraint. And when we evaluated the wild Pennisetum species, we found high level of resistance for blast. And we have now introgressed blast resistance into pearl millet genotypes, including the hybrid parents, and we have very good material for use in the breeding programs. And second is not only in pearl millet, in pigeon pea also Phytophthora blight is emerging as a major threat. And then in chickpea, so you know, in every crop we have one or the other threat. So biodiversity will really provide an answer to address these constraints. Besides this, we are also working on diversification. For example, and we are talking about narrow genetic base in our modern crop cultivars. So which may, cause the genetic vulnerability of these modern crop cultivars. So we are focusing on diversification of the resistance. So I'll take an example of peanut, wherein late leaf spot in most of the peanut varieties across the globe, it is coming from wild Arachis species, which is Arachis cardinesi. So there is, very high probability of resistance getting broken down. So we are diversifying and we are using different Arachis species and we have already developed introgression lines, which are being used by the breeders in Mali, Malawi, and other African countries. We have shared the material so that they can develop new cultivars. So overall, what I think is utilization of these wild species in developing the introgression lines, which have the trait of interest from wild species and in acceptable agronomic background, they will provide new and diverse sources of material for use in breeding programs so that they can develop new varieties which can be grown by the farmers. Thank you.
Okay, well, that was quite interesting. Alejandro, this comes to you. Well, why are you dedicated so much? And I have a question here that I would like from the audience, I would like to add to that. Why are you doing it? And do you believe that there's nutritional value in what it is that you're doing?
Well, first, the why. I think that's a very interesting question. The compounding problems of biodiversity loss, climate change, food insecurity, poverty, and all these new crises like COVID-19 that we're facing right now requires integrated approaches. We cannot do it just with ex situ or lab work. We must involve farmers there and their landscapes. It is the landscapes that provide the space for the continual evolutionary processes that will ensure that agriculture is viable in the future. Now, in the potato part, the farmers conserve more than 1,300 varieties with different shapes, colors, textures, sizes that are native with the original composition. So that composition by itself has proven to be highly nutritious. They have high content of antioxidants and other types of nutraceutical content that it's proven now that with COVID, it provides the people that, strength. We believe that the source of that our communities have not gotten this problem because of the localization and the control of the food systems. Also, I believe that by conserving the landscape, you also conserving the wild relatives, which are the source of pre-breeding material. So an integrated approach that has a landscape focus, like in the case of the potato park, conserves the traditional varieties, the wild relatives, but also the culture, which is so important in terms of transmitting knowledge, working with scientists to capture those types of knowledge to produce, evidence about the different changes that we facing, be it climate change, be it diseases, or how the potatoes are moving very fast in the mountain. And let me say this, in all this work, collaboration is very important. We need to bring together closely the in situ and ex situ approaches into a circular system that feeds back each other and provides the means for farmers to continue practicing their knowledge systems, protect their landscapes, protect the nutrition systems that are critical, and also bring new knowledge from scientists.
Yes, absolutely. And Alejandro, I want to ask you the follow-up question that comes from the audience. What is the role, I think you touched on it a little bit, what is the role of the indigenous knowledge, of the farmers' knowledge into the pre-breeding? And in your case, it's really going directly into the farmer. What is the role in that shift from the gene bank to the field?
Listen, here in the Andes, we co-evolve with El Nino. So our environment is very chaotic, and chaos has been the source of innovation, the source of creativity. Now, farmers in our region continue to farm the cultivated varieties close to the wild relatives and allow for gene transfer to happen. We have even a name in Quechua, which means halpa, means to make it strong. That means that when the seed becomes weak, farmers take those seeds, put it close to the ancestor, we call it grandfather. And so that this exchange happens and new seeds that have that vigor are used by the farmers. And that's the way how farmers create new varieties. This is, evolutionary plant breeding is very old as humanity. And farmers continue practicing. In collaboration with the International Potato Center, we have repatriated around 450 varieties of potato that used to be in the area, now are back in the communities. This has provided for economical opportunities, responding to market demands, gastronomy, creation of natural products from potatoes like solar blockers, even chocolates. If you mean cocoa bean with potato, you have choco papa. That's what we call it. So, the indigenous knowledge, remember that in Peru, we practice agriculture for 10,000 years, and this is the center of origin of the potato. And our mothers and grandmothers know how to cook each one of them in combination. So knowledge about nutrition, knowledge about, the phenotypical aspects of each variety is in traditional knowledge, is in indigenous knowledge, and it's very important to keep it and to collaborate.
Well, that's fantastic. And your sentence, cows is a source of innovation. I'm Italian and I agree with you. That's exactly where innovation comes from. And that indigenous knowledge, be able to capture it. I heard from Rodrigo that is monitoring the app that our question is the biodiversity in the gene bank a solution to climate change, or is the most important solution to climate change? 86% thought that is one solution, and 14% agree with Maria that is the solution. So I think there's 14% that is not yet convinced Maria there. What should we tell them? We are gonna close now the session, and I would like to give you these opportunities of give us 1 minute. Why biodiversity? You know, where is the future? Convince that 14%. Thank you.
Like
So,
I
yeah,
said, because I already mentioned that biodiversity is as important as climate change. Because imagine you lose all your diversity in the field. How are you going to solve your nutrition? How are you going to deal with the work that we do that is under biofortification to get variety out, which are very high in beta carotene, which is a vitamin A, iron, and zinc. So for me, I will put them hand in hand, agrobiodiversity and climate change, because they are equally important. Because we need the diversity, we need the integration, we need sustainability, we need proper environment to be able to grow, we need to conserve. So for me, I always see biodiversity as very, very important. And I compare them also with the changing climate, losing of diversity due to drought, due to flood, due to other kind of cyclone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you of the panelists. Unfortunately, that's all we have the time for today. I wish we could spend another 2 hours. There were many other questions from the audience that were very interesting. Reach out to us. We are willing and available to try to answer some of your questions if we can. With that, I'll pass it back to you, Rodrigo, and thank you all for joining. Time for action is now. Biodiversity equal climate change. That sounds perfect. I couldn't say better. Perfect. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all for this very exciting panel. For us, agrobiodiversity conservation makes no sense if we don't have use attached to this effort. So it's great to hear all these experts' opinions on this. And at the Crop Trust, we're quite aware that the scientific knowledge our network fosters and creates daily is sometimes difficult to promote to a wider audience. Luckily for us, chefs are the superstars of today, and they can play a role in bridging this divide and inspiring consumers to try new things, to change unsustainable habits, to think of a better food future. We will now move to a talk by our partners at the Chef's Manifesto, who will talk about a new podcast series that we will launch next month, which attempts to do just this.
Hi, my name is Paul Newnham. I'm the director of the SDG2 Advocacy Hub and the facilitator of the Chef's Manifesto. It's wonderful to be here with you at the Global Landscapes Forum for a food and nutrition secure future, even if it is virtually. I wanted to take a few moments to introduce you to the Chef's Manifesto and to our exciting new Chef's Manifesto podcast season, which we're producing in collaboration with the Crop Trust and Food Forever. The Chef's Manifesto is a chef-led network of 800 plus chefs from over 80 countries around the world, and they're exploring together how they can help deliver a sustainable food system and good food for all. Chefs in the network are equipped with a framework that is tied to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, consisting of 8 thematic areas, which they feel most passionate about. These areas include things like protecting biodiversity, reducing food waste, supporting livelihoods, and also ensuring the affordability and accessibility of food. If you want to check out more about the Chef's Manifesto, please head over to our website at chefsmanifesto.com, and also consider following our Instagram at Chef's Manifesto. This way you'll be able to find out more and see some of the great work that chefs are doing. In March 2020, as part of the expansion of the network, we launched the Chef's Manifesto podcast. And this is designed to be a resource for chefs to share stories of action on sustainable development tied to the UN SDGs and through this Chef's Manifesto community. So our first season featured a total of 9 episodes, each covering one of the 8 thematic areas of the Chef's Manifesto. And the second season, which we launched recently in September, highlights chefs' voices around the recent COVID-19 situation. And so there's 4 episodes where chefs and experts discussed with the host, Chef Tom Hunt, how food production's been affected by the pandemic, what inequalities have been exposed and what the future holds, and how chefs are trying to stay strong and build back better. So we're super excited to now partner with the Crop Trust and Food Forever on this 3rd season, which will in each episode focus on a particular crop, highlighting different perspectives across the value chain. The crops we're spotlighting include potatoes, sorghum, millet, sweet potato, coffee, and wheat. And in each episode, what we'll do is hear from 2 chefs who are working and cooking with this particular crop in different parts of the world. We'll also hear from a crop expert, and they'll share insights from a scientific perspective. And for each of the podcast episodes, we'll also release a crop case study. And this will have stories on sustainability, relevant statistics, and quotes. We hope this will be a resource for chefs and for others in the broader community to really engage and understand the importance of some of the biodiversity that we have and the importance of these crops. I hope you'll be able to take a look and have a listen when they launch between November and January. The podcast is going to be available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, so feel free to subscribe to the Chef Manifesto channels to get updates about the launch. And I want to encourage you to have a great conference, and thanks for listening.
Thank you very much to all of you for joining us today. And I will finish the conference with a quick last video from the Food Forever campaign, Biodiversity for Resilience. Thank you very much.